button.
Don't do it.
Good morning.
Don't.
What's up, mediums? Welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. It's season 2, episode 65. I am Josh Hayes here with my co-host Scott Moon, and today the author of the Hayden War series and the Odyssey 1 series, Evan Currie, joins the show. He's been writing and publishing since 2011, and today he joins us to talk about his writing journey. Evan, welcome to the show.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
We spent the majority of the pre-show talking about mechanical keyboards because I bought one, and I think the clickety clack is very cool. Even though there's a mixed review on when I posted my video on the Facebook group, there was a mixed review. Some people like
people get really passionate about that. They get
some people like them. If you like the feel but you don't like the noise, you can actually get them with a quieter keystroke.
I write at 3 in the morning right next to my oldest daughter's bedroom in the basement, and so I can't clickety clack at 3 a.m. I'll wake up the dog, wake up my daughter. It'd be chaos. Cats and dogs living together. Complete breakdown of society.
Ones of the quieter key functions for sure.
Yeah. One thing that I always do when we have this show, I don't know if people know this, I've never talked about this before, I always pull up our guest's Amazon page. So Evan Currie's Amazon page, if you look at it right now while you're watching the show, you'll get to see all of his book covers. And I have to say they're awesome. And we may need to talk about that because I really like the way you've done that, especially with the typeface on some of them and the decisions you made there. But that's later in the show. We don't normally go straight into that.
You're jumping ahead, Scott. We got to pull him back, folks.
Back. It's like, like a muzzle.
For our audience that they're still streaming into the show, hey guys in the live chat, welcome to live. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Chuck the Man, Chuck Manley, Vicky, Ken, McClellan, Terry, Lauren, they're all there. What's up, guys? JR couldn't make it today because he's off doing something that's unrelated.
Crazy. Why would he
ridiculously
do that to us?
Yes.
Damn it, I'm really mad at JR now.
But if you're watching live and or listening to the feed, you'll know that we like to have the authors introduce themselves. So for those of you who are aware, then stand by because we're going to have Evan Currie tell him a little bit about himself. Can you tell us how you got started in writing and then kind of what led to you being an indie writer?
Well, I actually got started writing seriously as a fan fiction author.
Oh, neat.
Well, that's cool.
I was writing... got to be over 20 years ago now. I started as Star Trek, which seems to be pretty much where every science fiction writer tends to start if they get in fan fiction. And then I moved off into just writing mass crossovers, just taking every universe possible and smashing them together and trying to make sense of it.
Idea.
Star
what
Trek
could
fan
possibly
fiction,
go wrong?
Star Trek fan fiction, I think, like you said, is some place where a lot of people start. But even if you don't publish it, that's a huge basis for a lot of people's science fiction.
Well, in many ways, the Odyssey series is a more militaristic idea that still follows some of the basic Star Trek tropes. At least that's how it originated.
Right. So how did you get? So you started writing fan fiction 20 years ago, and then kind of take us through the evolution of your process there.
I was actually right. I actually started writing Odyssey 1 before I started writing fan fiction. So that book, its roots are way back there. But of course, the first book you ever write will take you 5 years, 10 years, God knows how long.
Right.
Yeah. I'm guessing that one took me about 5 years to write, the first version of it. By the end of it, of course, I was writing fan fiction more than I was writing my normal stuff. And there wasn't really a lot of options to get published. It was, do I want to try to go the normal route? And quite honestly, I was too lazy to. I sent it out to one publisher. I got an immediate rejection, which if they had not rejected me, I would have been really, really uncertain about wanting to be published by them, because that version of Odyssey 1, the version that originally got published, that I self-published, was so bad I considered it unfit for human consumption.
That's awesome. You send it off to the publisher. Hey, I want to publish. This is my cover letter, and this is a test to see if you'll make the page.
It was bad. I mean, Odyssey 1, the first version, if you go on Amazon and you go back to the oldest reviews, you will actually see reviewers fighting each other in the comments. I mean, getting into a straight up brawls over whether or not it was a good book. And the people who liked it thought it was had a good story, and they liked the characters and particularly the type of combat, which was very slow and methodical, kind of submarine combat sort of thing. Because I mean, you fire a shot, and it's going to take like 60 seconds before your laser hits the target. So you got like 2 minutes before any response to your shot can happen. So it's like, okay, fire the shot, and then I'm going to go get a coffee. I'll be right back. So people who like that, or the people who hated it, hated the fact that there was basically zero editing, and it hadn't survived well through all of the conversions from the original WordPerfect I wrote it in, eventually to Word.
Right.
So there was all kinds of weird artifacts in the book, and I'm one of those readers who I had to do the editing myself the first time. I couldn't afford it.
Sure.
Just couldn't afford it. But I'm also one of those readers that reads what's supposed to be there rather than what's actually there.
Oh, I hate that. I do that all the time. I do that to my own stuff, and then I send it out, and I'm like, that's not at all what I said.
Yeah, come on. Well, I mean, not what I said.
If you're that kind of reader, it's great for reading, but it's horrible for editing.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of different types of readers. People pick up different things and have different thresholds for their what they notice in editing. I never notice punctuation and stuff when I'm reading somebody else's book, or very rarely. But if I'm self-editing, it just drives me crazy. Or if I'm reading it for a friend, like a beta reading it, I really like when I'm reading for entertainment. The last thing I'm worried about is where the comma is, even though I'm a diehard Oxford comma guy.
Usually, I don't pay attention so much to the punctuation when I'm reading, but a lot of times I'll fall into the trap of thinking that's not how I would write it. And like I'd read a sentence, and then immediately in my head, I'm like, I wonder if it would sound better this way, a different way that I would write it.
That's hard when you're a writer, because I bet you do that at movies too. Didn't we talk about that one time?
Yeah.
Always.
Exactly.
When dealing with movies, I think the movies that frustrate me the most are the ones that are total bombs, but it's just like one or two changes, and they could have been almost classics.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you watch a movie and they have like either horrible dialogue or really bad plotting. And you're like, these people getting paid millions of dollars, well, probably not millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to write these scripts, and they are horrible. And then I read, indie books like yourself or Richard Fox or Ralph Kern or any of the guys that we've had on the show. And you're like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah. I think some of those scripts are written by committee. The writer brings in his baby and gives it, and people are like, well, no. We have to have a four-wheeler in here, and so fit that in there. And by the way, it has to be at night.
Yeah, but they're also determined by what the studios think they can pull off. The time the actors have. Like one of my favorite examples is the movie Battleship, which was really just a junk movie.
Right.
They kind of wanted to pretend to be more. Like the first 30 minutes, they're setting up this character arc for a guy, and it's like, guys, this isn't that kind of movie. You don't need to do this.
Yeah. Just start shooting.
And then at the end, it's like they have Liam Neeson there, and one little change. If they just made it so that everybody on the outside could look inside, we could have had great scenes with Liam Neeson and the president just chewing up the scenery, talking about what they're seeing, which would have been awesome. But instead, we got like maybe 15 minutes of good movie, and the rest is like,
Yeah. You're like banging your head with a frying pan. Like, come on, man.
So the 15 minutes, the good 15 minutes in that movie, is it at the beginning or the end?
I'd say it's more towards the middle, where you've got, well, not the middle, more closer to the end, but not right to the end.
Right.
I mean, the second one he says, no, like when they're like, we don't have a ship anymore. No, we have a battleship, and they go and you get that nice scene where they're bringing the Missouri out.
Yeah,
that would have been really good.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned writing Star Trek fan fiction. Did you ever publish any?
As in put it up on the internet, yes.
Oh, okay.
But the majority of my stuff was actually the mass crossover.
Yeah.
I wrote under the name Ten Hawk for a long time, and when it comes to mass crossovers, specifically focused on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because I really like that universe in terms of versatility.
Right.
I probably have maybe 3 or 4 million words out on the internet.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's good.
You know,
That's
just
a
in that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like 15 years of work that I was just, this is my hobby. But at the same time as I was doing all that, fan fiction is really good for polishing certain parts of your writer's toolkit. It's good for characterization because you know these characters and you start to figure out, okay, how they speak. And it gives you an idea of how to develop a unique twist to your characters. It's good for writing action. It's good for writing things like that. It's really bad for creating new characters.
Right.
It's really bad for creating new settings. So when I switched over to full-time original stuff, that's where I started faltering. It's like, Jesus, I'm so used to writing about things that people already know. I don't need to describe the Enterprise or Sunnydale or any of these worlds. Now it's like I keep having to be reminded, no, you need more description here.
You basically had to go back and dive into world building and all that stuff, and which can be fun. I mean, because it's always fun to start the first time with stuff. Well, maybe not always fun. That might be an understatement.
Tell us a little bit about Odyssey 1. What's the story there?
It's basically a first contact scenario. You know, humanity develops their FTL drive, and of course they go out and blunder right into the middle of a genocidal war.
Oops.
Nice. Congrats.
Good job.
Yeah, it's like, and from that point on, it really becomes like for the main character at least, like the different characters have different kind of story arcs and character arcs, but for the main character, it becomes a question of duty versus honor. You know, at what point, you know, do we step in here or do we not? We're not technically involved, but can we stand by and watch an entire planet be destroyed?
Yeah.
You know, and these sorts of questions keep coming up. And even in the book that I just finished last week, the question of duty, honor, and failure. What do you do when you actually fail? You can't save. You know, and that's basically kind of the questions that keep coming up in that series.
And so it's interesting to me the first contact, and then everything kind of devolves into a smorgasbord of destruction. How do you carry that on in a long running series?
See, at this point, it comes to a question of how do I think I carried on, or how do my readers think I carried on? Because I found that we don't agree. Some of the books in the series that I consider the weakest, I've had readers come up, well, you're crazy. That's the best book you wrote. And I'm like, but it was just half to 3/4 was just a retread of the book before. Yeah, but that was the best part of the book before.
I like that. You know, the readers want what the readers want, you know, so it's hard to.
So when you ask a question like that, though, it becomes important to define, okay, is this what I'm thinking, or is it what the readers are thinking? Because I've discovered that I have no idea what the readers think.
Well, and I'm curious. It sounds like you've had some feedback from your readers. So, I mean, is that through like beta readers or just reviews in your books, or you know, how do you get that feedback?
I interact with them all the time, mostly through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got, like, the vast majority of the people on my Facebook feed are my readers. I've got a few friends and family and so forth, but Facebook is not there for the friends and family. Facebook is there for my readers.
People, yeah, exactly.
Well, you've got, I mean, the first book in the Odyssey series has over 1,400 reviews, which is phenomenal for a series that's been going on. And then the books that carry on, usually you see a huge number and then it kind of dwindles off, which it does in your case. However, that dwindling is still 800, 732, 780, 500. So still a very big read through to your books.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Very impressive. So when you talk about connecting with fans and then how they think the series is going to go, do you get a lot of input, and did you take that a lot of input and change where you thought the story was going to go, or how do you deal with keeping those readers to come back and still read and leave reviews?
Well, I find interacting with readers really helps. Okay, it gives readers, it keeps you the readers' minds. Because that's one of the biggest problems, is that if you have no interaction with your readers whatsoever and you publish a book, well, a year later, they may or may not remember you.
Right.
Okay. And sometimes, like in the question of the Odyssey, I mean, the first one come up like 6 years ago or so, in 2011 in the spring, so a little over 6 years now. The next one was well over a year later when it came out. Okay, because it had to go through the editing process for 47 North, because the Odyssey 1 was picked up by 47 North that summer.
Okay.
Okay, and then editing takes so long when you're dealing with a actual publishing house. Well, independent's easy. It's like, do a copy edit, read through it again, here it goes. I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Well,
but publishing houses, they get pretty specific over, no, we want this continuity, we want everything has to be right. I think Odyssey 1, as an idea of how bad it was, it went through at least, I think, a half a dozen editors before they put it out.
Oh, wow.
It went through a lot of desks, and to the point where I got a phone call. They were at the printers, and they could you check page whatever and tell me if this word is right, for like 2 words, just before they hit print.
Well, I'm curious.
Then,
how long did you have it? How long did you have it indie published before 47 North picked it up?
Well, it was actually out for about a year before they officially released it.
Okay.
But they picked it up within 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was one of 47 North's launch titles that they didn't even exist as a company when they picked it up.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So how did that?
Really cool.
I mean, now you hear 47 North and you're like, oh yeah, I want to go with them because they do really good work. So
they're awesome.
Not having any basis on to see how successful it was going to be, how easy or how difficult was it to make that choice to go from indie to them?
At the time, I had 2 offers. One was a small publishing house, and the other was from Alex Carr at 47 North. And I was looking between the 2, and there wasn't any real question that I was going to choose one of them, because indie was great, but at that point I was not certain whether or not I could make like the next indie book work. The one before it had not, and I had no idea why this one had worked.
Is that other one still up?
Yeah, so I was very much like, okay, you know what? I'm going to try and get that marketing budget behind me.
Yeah.
And it was difficult in a way, but at the same time, I was looking at 47 North, and I did the research, and I looked at what they were offering, and it was like the high end of standard for the industry at the time. And I just decided I'm going to gamble on Amazon.
Yeah,
that's basically what it came to.
Yeah, well, and I think there's a lot of smaller press publishers that are out there that are really awesome, but you do have to be careful because, it's the barrier to entry is pretty low, and some people just want to take your book and publish it, and they're not going to do anything for you. And that goes the same for some traditional houses too. From what I've heard, is that they don't always guarantee you budgeting and editing and all that stuff. A lot of that still falls on the writer.
Yeah, and to be honest, marketing is always going to fall on the writer. It doesn't matter who picks up your book.
Yeah,
marketing is always going to be a major part of your responsibility as an author.
Right.
Because who has the most invested in the book?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
in a perfect world, we could all just write and then just not have to do anything else. Just write and have fun and talk on Keystroke Medium and stuff. That'd be better.
I've only done how many books have I've done a few short stories. I've done 1 or 2 books by myself. And even after doing those, I'm like, I don't want to do formatting anymore. I don't want to do anything. I just want to write it, send it, be done with it.
And that's basically what I do with independent stuff. I get it copy edited, and then I'm done with it. It's like, no, I'm not. I don't really care about this long editing process. Once the copy edit's done, just make sure that all the basic continuity is right, and then it's out. I'm done with the book, and I'm all moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. We've talked about Odyssey 1 for a minute. You've got 2 other, 2 other main series. You have Hayden War, and then you have a fantasy series too. I want to talk about Hayden War for a minute, just because if everybody that watches the show all the time knows, Scott and I are really big cover junkies, and like Scott said at the beginning of the show, your covers on the Hayden War series are absolutely beautiful. I mean, and I don't even think I've seen branding on your name is
that's what I wanted to go to next.
I mean, that is legit. And we talked about a little bit about it during the pre-show the other day. But before we get into the cover and the design and all that cool stuff, I kind of want to talk about the series. Is it still in the same universe as the Odyssey 1 series, or is this completely different?
It's a completely different series. If Odyssey 1 was inspired primarily by Star Trek, Hayden War is inspired primarily by David Weber's In Fury Born.
Oh, neat.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
David Weber's another favorite. Good stuff.
Yeah,
that was one of his standalone. Did he make a sequel? I can't remember if he made a sequel or not.
He expanded the novel with a novella attached to the beginning of it, which explains her backstory even more.
Phenomenal story. If you're familiar with David Weber, when he's been on the show too, and you've read Honor Harrington, the In Fury Born standalone is probably one of my favorite books of his.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were talking about the relationship between In Fury Born and kind of where you went with your other project. So,
well, the main character in Fury Born is Alicia DeVry, and she's a drop cadre, a drop commando. And I decided that I wanted that kind of character, but at the same time, when I started writing this, I was kind of stuck in this very much kind of first contact, early development. I didn't want to launch into really advanced technology. I wanted to stay with stuff that's 150 years out if everything goes really well, kind of. So I made her a special forces cultural expert and a trainer. Okay, so she's got the power armor. Her specialty is literally go into an area and either topple a government or build up a new government from scratch, just using whoever's there already. And that's kind of where I decided to take that story, about a character who is used to working largely on her own or within a very small group, and just gathering anybody who's available and training them to do whatever has to be done.
A force multiplier.
Yeah. And that one's been a fun series, although it's become a bit of a running joke even in the series that she tends to John Wayne things a little bit too much.
There's nothing wrong with John Wayne.
No, well, it's not how you're supposed to do things.
Right.
Her character arc gets set right in the first page. The first line of the first book is "Terminal velocity sucks," and she literally has to pick herself up out of the ground. She's the only survivor of her team. Her everything's screwed up, and she's just basically plowed into the force floor at barely survivable rates, and that's the line that goes to her mind is "Terminal velocity sucks." Just before she takes off her helmet, pukes. Concussion, just totally out of it.
I love that. We've talked about first lines.
Coach, put me in.
Yeah, and she's all. We've talked about first lines before on the show, and
that's a good line.
Really good first lines. I like a lot. Terminal velocity sucks. That's up there with The Martian and Andy Weir. I love those kind of just like abrupt. Okay, this is the way the book's going to be about. I like that.
Off we go.
And so you have. How many books in that series? 6?
7 released today. The 7
today. Very nice, and that's Open Arms on Silver Wings, Book 7. Very cool. Yeah. Oh, I like that cover.
Yeah. The artist is a Polish artist by the name of I'm gonna completely screw up his pronunciation here. Tomasz Maronski.
He does some good work, that's for sure. Wow.
Yeah, when it comes to the branding that you were talking about later, this is all his work. When you're looking at the stuff and you're seeing I had him go back and redo all of the art for the Hayden War series.
Yeah.
Because the Polish publisher had picked it up, and they had been working with it, and I started to see. I think they picked it up at like book 4 or 5, and I saw those covers come out, and I'm like, yeah, I really like those. And it's like, could you go back and redo? I want to see. I want to see everything. I want to see the whole thing all done in a consistent style, and he's really good at that consistent branding style.
Right.
It's interesting. I don't think enough indies really put their name big enough on the books like that. Because if you look at traditional published ones, sometimes, and of course they have their part of their brand, and the reason a book sells is because of who they are. But I don't think people should be afraid to put their name big on there, and that it just looks good. And plus the art. I mean, I'd make a poster and hang it on my wall most all of your book covers. So, like I said, we're book cover junkies. We'll go on and geek out over that for a while.
Well, my first book cover, the first one for Odyssey 1, I believe you had a look at it. It's still floating around in different places. It was made with I grabbed some free models of spaceships, and then I slammed them into iClone, and I put a background up, and I just put my name, like you said, I put my name really too small, and the big title, Odyssey 1, over the top. And
is that the one? Is it like a purple cover?
Yeah, that's the one. And it's just a horrible cover. I mean,
do you mind if I share that? Because that's cool.
Go ahead. This is a learning curve that everybody's got to go through when you're doing this. And 6 years ago, this cover for an independent wasn't horrible. It wasn't great. But 6 years ago, you could get away with this. Today, if you're an independent and you're trying to launch a new book, you can't get away with this same cover.
Have a good cover, yep.
I found the same thing when it comes to fan fiction. When I started writing fan fiction like 20 years ago, in order to be a decent fan fiction author, you didn't have to be a great writer. You just had to have an okay story. But nowadays, in the fan fiction community, I've watched over 20 years. I've watched the level of talent and skill increase every single year. And now, in order to come in at the top tier of fan fiction authors, you've got to have your craft down.
So I'll share the cool one here in a minute. The other ones that we're talking about, but I might have to switch.
I can see it,
but it's right there. So that's the original cover, which, like you said, at the time, still a pretty good cover.
And you still have the branding. You have Currie branding,
right?
As far as author branding. So you're off. I mean, that's where we got started with that.
Yeah, it all comes down to. It's like I say, the level of skill in a particular community will keep building. It's like that old saying. I believe it was Einstein who said that I stood on the shoulders of giants. We do the same thing. Every community does the same thing. We get better based on the experiences of the people who come before us. And nowadays, you've got to you have to look at all of that experience, and you have to use it. Otherwise, you're just not going to rank the same way that this particular cover could have ranked.
So I'm going to share the third cover in the Hayden War series, because I think that's really, really cool. And then everybody can see the branding that we're talking about in the name here, and the Hayden War series titles. Very cool. But I mean, you go from that original cover that you had in Odyssey 1 to this cover, and I mean, this cover really blows me away, and I think it speaks a lot to the series and to the character.
Can you show the one was released today?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Was a new one. I may be looking at the wrong one now that I think about it.
Oh, I got it right.
The one that was released today is the one with the red dress.
Yes.
Oh yeah. That's that
5.5 seconds, and I will have it ready.
1001, one hippopotamus, two hippopotamus.
While I'm doing that, and we'll break for our show sponsor here in a second. But you have not only written fantasy or science fiction, but you've also written some fantasy. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I've crossed over into fantasy a little bit. I've got 2 series out that are kind of based a little bit in fantasy. One I call science fantasy. It's definitely my Star Wars inspired, and that would be Heirs of Empire. Okay, it's still kind of sciencey, but it's definitely more leaning towards the fantastical version. The space opera and so forth.
What was it?
And this is the cover that came out today, or the book that came out today. Open Arms, Evan Currie.
Yeah, and you can see his branding on the title. is great. It feels like it's part of the same series as all the other covers in the series, and that's important. It's something that a lot of writers I found when they first get started, they just think cool cover, and when they read book 2, it's like cool cover, but does that cool cover feel like the sequel to the first cover?
Absolutely, and I think it does. I mean, I love the kind of the cool the dress thing too. I think that really really kind of brings it out a little bit and says what's going on here.
It puts a lot of motion. The picture has a lot of motion. It's not a static picture. It's not like a profile picture.
In that particular case, and in the case of the previous cover, these are both scenes from the books, where I describe.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, it's like what he asked me what I wanted on the cover, and I said, well, there's a scene, like in this particular one, there's a scene where she is forced into a fight at a formal party, and it's like I've described the red dress and so forth and all this here, and he took it, he turned it into this just from.
It's a tough crowd. You get in a fight at a formal party, and it involves gunplay and all kinds of action. Ken McClellan was asking who the designer cover is. I guess he must have missed that earlier.
Tomasz Maronski, Polish artist, and he's really very good.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm gonna do one more since we're on a cover kick here, and
just go down the list.
Here's the latest one in his the latest one, the fantasy series that he has written, and that's the first one.
I love this cover.
It's great. I like it a lot.
It's this here is an artist from New York. I can't remember his name right now because I don't work with him directly. This comes through 47 North. But he did this cover, and he did the cover for the sequel. And I'm hoping they'll let me write the third book to finish it off. For some reason, sales on the second book flatlined last year. I blame the election personally. It come out just after the election in November.
Right.
And that's literally the only outlier that I can tell because the reviews are good on both books.
Yeah, they are very good.
But for some reason, the second book just nobody picked it up, and I'm hoping to wrap up the trilogy.
That type of stuff happens, and it's something that people don't really appreciate is that, people's energy and attention is drawn definitely very powerfully, and people are tired after some of that. But somebody was talking about they had written a book and they were getting ready to launch it right before 9/11 happened, and basically everybody just shut down because we had other things to worry about. But you never know what's going to happen. There could be a hurricane.
It's like I say, I can't say that it was the election, but I tend to laughingly blame it on that because I haven't been able to figure out what could have caused it to go flatline like it did. But at the same time, it happened.
In our household, we're a lot of big readers, my wife and I and stuff, and we weren't reading anything for months. All we did is talk about that stuff. So, and we don't need to get into that because I want to gouge my own eyeballs out right now.
Well, it's a good place to skip here, and we're gonna talk about just
change the subject.
Change the subject. We're gonna talk about our show sponsor today. Another book that just released today or this week is Explorations Colony. It's the fourth book in Nathan Heisted's Explorations anthologies. I was in the first 3. Scott is in the last 3. And this is Explorations Colony. The best-selling series continues to tell brand new, never-before-seen stories. The war is over, Earth all but disseminated, the sun dying. But there's still hope. Colony ships leave, taking the lucky ones across the galaxy in search of new worlds to call home. Among the stars, they will find strange wonders and new terrors. Join an all-star cast as they set forth on Earth's most important exploration yet in Explorations Colony. Jasper T. Scott, Amy DuBois, Felix Savage, Ralph Curran, Ian Waite, Scott Bartlett, Scott Moon, Robert M. Campbell, Scarlet Allergy, Nathan Heisted, Tim C. Taylor, and Dennis E. Taylor all contributed. Go check it out. I will put the link in the live chat and also in the video description.
Since it's our show, I'm going to be shameless and tell you to go check my story. And that one is called Spiderfall, and I really like it. And if you don't like spiders, it's going to freak you out. But really, it's good. You got to read it. So Thank you.
Very good. Awesome. So I want to continue to move while we're still talking about branding. And you mentioned in the pre-show when we were talking about your covers that that actually came from your Polish publisher, and that Poland makes up 10% of your total sales?
Something like that. Yeah, I haven't crunched the numbers exactly for this year, but it was pretty close to that last year.
And so I'm interested to know, do you know why in Poland your books have picked up so much? Or
you're like David Hasselhoff of Poland?
It's basically something like that. I have no idea exactly. I do know that I was invited out to PeerCon to speak and to do panels and stuff. And I went out there this spring, and I ran into more readers of my books there than I have ever run into anywhere in North America, despite the fact that most of my readers are in North America. It's just a freaking huge place, though.
Yeah,
so you rarely get more than a couple in any one spot.
That's really cool, though. I mean, I'd like to go to Europe and tour around there. So I guess we'll all start with Poland. Let's all jump on a plane right now and go over there. You can introduce us to all the cool people.
Apparently, there's a very large market for, I mean, relatively speaking, for science fiction and fantasy. It seems to be a thriving market compared to, in general.
Yeah, that's good.
Is it just for that series that's doing the Hayden War series, or are all your books do well over there?
Odyssey, Hayden, and they recently picked up Knighthood, so that'll be coming out there too.
And so you mentioned too that your hybrid or traditionally published with several, but you still do indie publishing. Which series do you still do by yourself?
Well, the Hayden War series is all indie on this side. It's
okay.
Semi-traditional in Poland, or traditional in Poland, but I do the indie releases, and Audible does pick up and turn it into audiobooks, though.
Oh, I love audiobooks.
Love audiobooks too. Well, so I want to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of how you do it and the mechanics. We like to talk about Word and Scrivener, but what do you like to use to create these books when you sit down to write them?
Okay, I always preface, whenever anybody asks me a question like this, I always preface that no writer should try to do it my way.
I like your way better already because I have exact same advice. Anyway, go ahead.
I sit down. I usually know two things when I start writing a book. I usually know more or less where I'm beginning, and I usually have an idea for the very last line of the book.
Nice.
And then I start from A and I work my way to Z. And that's all I do. I just open up Word. I don't use Scrivener or anything like that. I've tried, but I find planning is really not my thing. But at the same time, I do advise anybody who wants to do this, try planning it out first. Try doing it the so-called right way first. If it doesn't work for you, then go with what works.
Yeah.
But you should try to do it. Try to set up your stories in such a way that you can easily go back and say, oh yeah, this character is over here at this point in the story. This character is dead. Don't bring him back. Yeah.
That's always fun when the dead come back on accident.
So without planning on these long running series, how do you keep track of what's going on? Like I know Scott and I, we've had a couple conversations where you've had to gone back and reread some of your previous books to kind of figure out where you're at in the current book. Do you have a system in place, or do you have a Bible already set up where you know what's going on in these universes?
Basically, I just keep it all in my head.
Oh.
Which is why I do not advise anybody try it my way.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Drink lots of coffee, keep it all in your head, go slowly insane, and become a writer. It's great advice. Everybody should try it. No, that's good. That's one of the things that slows me down. Even though I try to plan, I never follow the plan. And I have to a lot of times read from the beginning of the book, which gets really time consuming as the book gets longer and longer.
Yeah,
exhausting.
for Odyssey 1, I must have reread Odyssey 1 like 50 times while I was writing. It's like I would write so far, and then I better go back, and I would reread the whole book up to where I wrote it, and then I would go and do it. But I mean, it took me like 5 years to write.
Right.
Odyssey 7, I wrote in about 3 weeks.
Cool.
You know,
is that because you wrote more in larger blocks? So we talked about that with some guests where, you know, some of us are working 15 jobs, and so you write 15 minutes here and there. But it seems like more possible to write, like you're talking about the 3 weeks, if you can write in larger blocks and kind of keep the story in your head. So what's the difference between 5 years and 3 weeks with your writing style?
Really, it came down to, in the case of Odyssey 7 specifically, is that I knew the story going in. Okay, like Odyssey 6 probably took me about 2 or 3 months because, and to my mind, the Odyssey 6 is coming out in December. And to my mind, it was a kind of a chopped up story. It didn't feel right to me, which is why it took longer to put together. Whereas Odyssey 7, I know what the story is going to be. I know where it's going. I know where it starts. I know where it ends. And then I just, 3 weeks and I'm done. I send it off. I'm going to have to pad it out a little bit because usually I'm pretty good at guesstimating, bringing it to the word count. This time I come in a little short, so I definitely plan on expanding some sections. But the key is knowing the story before you start. If you know the story, it's not going to take you very long.
So you say you wrote the latest book in the Odyssey 1 series in 3 weeks. Is that all typed words, or do you use dictation? I mean, I did a sprint here a couple weeks ago to finish off this novel I was working on, and I had to do kind of a mix between dictation and actually typing. And dictation actually boosted my word count a lot. But so what do you do word count wise during the day to push yourself to finish a book in 3 weeks?
Well, in that case, I was doing somewhere around the last week in particular. I was doing somewhere around 12,000 words a day.
Oh, nice, good job.
With 2 days where I managed to get like 1,000 words in on these 2 days or so. But like I get like 2 days with 12,000 words, and then I'd need a third day where I just need to stop and slow down for a bit, and then the next 2 days I'd hammer out the 2,000 words again, or the 12,000 words again.
That's crazy. And it's amazing, one, that you can do 12,000 words in a day, because I've hit 4,500 or 5,500 in one day, and I wanted to gouge my eyes out with a spoon. But that you did it multiple days, and you did it without an outline, I'm guessing, if you don't plan.
No outline.
So that's nuts.
But there's some quantities of scale type of things kicking in there, because if you're in the story and you don't leave it, I think it'd be easier. But every time you get it's like when your kid's running in the middle, or, the tornado alarm goes off, because we're in Kansas and that happens about every 10 minutes, or something, or you're trying to fit it into a chaotic schedule. It's hard to keep the flow. I guess once you're in the flow, stay there, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. Once you have the basic story and you get it going, it's surprisingly how much after a little while you look at, like, at first you're looking up, well, geez, I only got 400 words or only 200 words or whatever. But then towards the end of it, you look up, how did I write 2,000 words since the last time I checked?
That's a good feeling.
And yeah, if you have constant distractions, you're never going to get to that level of word count. It doesn't matter how well you know the story, because the distractions will keep breaking you out of it, and there's no way you can get into that, like into the zone, as they say.
Yeah, the zone's a good place.
And Vicky mentioned it earlier, and I'm looking at your room now, and it kind of seems like you're maybe in kind of a wood cabin-esque type environment. Is that something is this where you live, or do you have like a writing retreat that you go to get these words distractionless?
This is my home. This is it's not exactly a log cabin, although it is made out of logs. It's more of a, every Hollywood rendition of a Colorado ski lodge.
Okay.
That's what this place is.
All right.
It's really a fantastic home, and it's one of those things that almost anywhere else in the country or on the continent would have cost me like 5 or 6 times what it did. But here, as it turns out, is a real buyer's market, so I managed to get it at a price that didn't kill me.
Wow. So you mentioned 12,000 words a day. How often can you do that? What, I mean, is that average for you?
No, not even close.
Is that because you're on a deadline or something else?
It was a combination of things. That I was on a deadline, and I had been procrastinating like crazy because, well, I wound up going to Dragon Con and then HalCon in the same month, and I was exhausted. And I'd scheduled those like a year ago. And of course, the deadline got scheduled at the same time, and I'm an idiot for letting that happen.
Even the best laid plans go awry.
And that's just how it just turned out that. And also, I had meant to have Open Arms finished last month, and I was supposed to have completely free block other than the 2 conventions. And the last 10,000 words of Open Arms just got up and kicked me in the ass. Like, no, you're not going to finish this month.
So it's funny, we've been going at it so fast, I've kind of lost a couple of things. So 2 questions that are kind of important to this discussion is, you're a full-time writer, and do you listen to music while you write?
Yes and yes.
What kind of music?
Actually varies very much on what I'm trying to write.
Mm-hmm.
When I actually have a playlist for when I was writing on Silver Wings, like I can't remember which book, but hang on a sec. I'm just going to go and check the playlist here. No,
Richard Fox says he took you to Waffle House during Dragon Con.
Yes, he did. He showed up for an award show, and I believe he won.
Yes, he did win.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Richard. Congratulations.
Everybody clap for Richard.
Best Dragon Award for Best Military Science Fiction Novel of 2017. So good. Yeah. Very, very cool. Vicky says, you never took me to a Waffle House, Richard. Come on. Okay, I'm curious to see what this restaurant that he's talking about. We're going to Las Vegas in how many weeks? 3 weeks.
It's coming right up.
20 books to 50K, and so on the gosh, I can't remember what date. What day is the Monday that day? The 6th of November. We won't have a show because we'll be flying. However, we'll be having a lot of live bits while we're at the conference, and Richard said he's going to take us out to dinner one of those days. So I'm going to be interested to see how that dinner goes.
It's always fun going to conference. You think I'm going to do all this media content and these things, but you kind of get swept away usually with.
Yeah, there's so much going on, especially at larger cons, that it's just like you barely get to the things you know you have to do, and then the rest is like, oh, I might do this, or I might just crash. But you were asking about the like the music.
Yeah.
I can't remember which Silver Wings book this was for, but the playlist I put together was Ballad of the Green Beret, which was actually the inspiration for one of the first scenes in Silver Wings in the first book. Sink the Bismarck, Battle of New Orleans, Ghost Riders in the Sky, the Warrior Song, actually all 4 versions of the Warrior Song. Sergeant Mackenzie, Trace Adkins Till the Last Shot's Fired, and Johnny Cash, I Won't Back Down, which is basically what I listened to while I was writing that book.
So that's way better, because Josh's list is mostly just ABBA songs and Bee Gees. Actually, I like both.
I try to pick stuff that kind of fits more or less in with what I'm writing. It's when I was writing Heirs of Empire, the list was actually Affinity's End, Dawson's Christian, Fire in the Sky, Carmen Miranda's Ghost, 40,000 in Gehenna, Space Oddity, Chris Hadfield's version. Chris Hadfield and Bare Naked Lady singing Is Someone Singing. Carmen Miranda's Ghost, Guardians, Ballad of Apollo 13, and Sing Me Mallory again.
your list there now, are a lot of these with lyrics? Because I know we've talked about it before. Some people like music with lyrics. Some people like soundtracks without lyrics.
Always with the lyrics.
Yeah.
Mm.
For me, it's the story behind the music that matters more than the music. I can't tell you anything about chords or anything like that. I'm just short of being tone deaf. I love the stories in the music.
Yeah.
I usually listen to either a Brain FM, or I've got a whole bunch of soundtracks on tap that I listen to. Some of them I have to do, like for my Second Star series, I have the Tron Legacy soundtrack on repeat, and I can't write anything in that series unless I have the Tron Legacy soundtrack playing, which is very weird.
Well, I really try to tailor it to the book. Like the last Open Arms and Knighthood 2, I was listening to a lot of old country ballads because both of them wound up with a kind of a gunfighter feel to them.
Yeah, I love country for the stories. It's one of those musical genres that's most likely to have a story in there, despite what everybody teases about. Richard Fox says Brain FM in the house. Josh and I both talked about Brain FM. And it's
crazy the way that works.
It's surprisingly amazing. And, you know, I would recommend people try that. And obviously we're not sponsored by them, though we should be.
We
love it. So
they actually don't have a sponsorship program, but they said if they did, they would let us do it.
They were afraid. They were intimidated by. They're intimidated by Keystroke Medium. That's why they don't do it.
Isn't everybody?
Yeah, I mean they're.
The one question I did have that I want to touch on is going back and forth between science fiction and fantasy without having plots or planning out these novels. Do you have any difficulties jumping between the series, or do they kind of flow once you get into them again? They just flow out of you.
Well, I'll preface it by saying that even my fantasy stuff like Knighthood tends to have a lot of science fiction wrapped into it.
Okay.
Since you made that distinction between the two. Uh-huh. But no, generally speaking, I can keep the different continuities fairly separate in my head.
Okay.
I won't say it's never happened that there's been a little bit of a slip, like a character name popping up from one series into another when he really shouldn't be there. That has happened. But doesn't happen very often.
Interesting. So what do you have planned for the rest of the year? Now, you just released a book today. Do you go on the release a book every 30 to 60 to 90 days, or how do you work your release schedules?
Usually I try to release about 4 books a year. Mm-hmm. And that's actually going to happen. I might actually have 5 or 6 out this year. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, all except one of them wound up in the last quarter. And this happened. It's been a real pain in my backside because if you don't release a book fairly regularly, your sales tend to drop, and you wind up worrying about losing readers forgetting about you, basically.
Right.
Knighthood should have been out in August. Knighthood 2 should have been out in August, but it basically Kindle Press had an interest in it, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to let that series go with them, and of course that requires more editing than I was planning on.
Right.
So it got pushed off, and then the last 10,000 words of Open Arms kicked me in the backside, so it got pushed off by a month.
A lot of backside kicking going on there in the Currie household, I've noticed.
So, like, I have at least 3 books definitely coming out between now and the end of the year.
Cool.
When normally I would have 1, and the other 4 books of the year would have been spread out evenly through the year.
Vicky Malone Kennedy has a question I'd like to get to, but first I want to ask my favorite question that I try to ask every guest if I remember it, and if I forget and Josh prompts me. But I like to ask people, do you have a favorite secondary character that you like to write in any of your series?
Secondary characters. I'm trying to think. I think right now my favorite secondary characters would probably be the Geez, that's actually a difficult question to answer.
You have multiple points of view in your books. I guess I should ask that earlier. As far as
all the characters, I don't. The characters all have their own points of view, and I try to they have their own opinions and thoughts, and even the bad guys tend to have their sympathetic moments because everybody is a hero of their own story. The bad guys, to them, they are. Whether they're doing bad things or not, they still think they're the hero.
Right.
But when it comes to secondary characters, I think in the Knighthood series, I like Caleb, who is he's starting off kind of as a just dogged determination, nothing else, and he's starting to develop more interesting skills and powers and so forth as he goes along, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
Which was always the plan to begin with. He is like, I don't know if I can even call him a secondary character because he's going to wind up being one of the 5 core characters eventually.
That's kind of why I asked that question. Is a lot of times those favorite secondary characters rise to prominence in books and become kind of the core cadre and stuff. It's kind of just something I'm very interested in. Vicky, she wanted to know if you work on more than one project at a time.
Sometimes, but lately I found that working on more than one project at a time tends to slow me down too much. So, like I said, the last 10,000 words of Open Arms kicked me in the ass and I couldn't get it down. I tried to set that book aside entirely. I've got a deadline. I'm going to wrap up Odyssey 7, but it wouldn't leave me alone. You know, I should have had a month to finish the last half of that book. But Open Arms wouldn't leave me alone, and it kept on bugging at me, and I was only able to get a few hundred words here and there on Odyssey 7. So finally I said, screw it. I'm just going to put Odyssey 7 aside. I'm going to finish this damn book. and you know, I wrapped it up. It took me a week to wrap that up. Then I had to go to another convention. I come back and I had about 8 days to do the last half of Odyssey 7.
No pressure.
Yeah, basically.
Good deal.
Well, we mentioned, and I can't remember if we talked about it earlier. You mentioned that the 12,000 words isn't your average. But what does a typical day look like for you when you start writing? As a full-time writer, you kind of got to do it every day. I try to aim for about 1,500 words. So what's your average writing day look like?
Ideally, I would be happy with 1,000 words a day, like averaged over the year.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I know about writing is that procrastination is actually part of the process.
Yes,
I knew it. See,
if you don't, like, when you're procrastinating, when you're like, that usually means you're not ready to be working on whatever it is that's in front of you, and you're thinking about it. You're trying to work out, okay, where the hell am I going from here?
Right.
And that makes procrastination actually an integral part of the process. So I don't think I can give an average. Like, I mean, my books take between 50 and 100 hours of actual writing time.
Yeah.
Okay. Which means in theory I could write a book in a week. You know,
Right.
50-hour work week. Sure. Lots of people do a 50-hour work week.
Right.
Right.
In practice, that's just never going to happen.
But that's different because I think there's been studies that show a 50-hour work week at your regular job. Most employers only get 2 to 3 hours of work out of their employees. So nobody's going to work and just like pedal to the metal for 10 hours. Like,
and you got to calculate all the time.
That depends on the job. There are some jobs, particularly seasonal jobs, where you don't have a choice. You got to get that job done, and you only have a certain amount of time to get it done.
That's true.
I've worked seasonal jobs where 60 to 70 hours was normal for the first month or more.
Right.
And you did it. You had to be there and turned on, because anybody who wasn't turned on, and there's always that guy who isn't, just drags everybody else down.
Right.
That's why, like, if you're working on a custom cutting crew or something, they work those 14-hour days. You know, you can't just like start goofing off while you're driving the combine around and stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is probably a fairly good generalization. You want to handle these questions in the chat, Josh?
Yeah, we'll take one more and then we'll probably wrap it up. Terry Toombs asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years as an author?
That's a good question. And I'm going to say that I don't think it's something that can be predicted. I know where I'd like to be. I would love to have my version of The Martian success.
Yes.
You know? But the fact is that books like that can never be predicted. You can't predict. Like, Odyssey 1 was my first success, you know, and it sold really well. I think it's heading for 200,000 copies sold right now.
Nice.
And I don't think that counts the first year where it was still selling as independence.
Okay.
Now, 200,000 copies, that's a really good benchmark.
Right. It's a phenomenal benchmark.
It took a stroke of luck, because that book was not good enough in its original form in order to predict that kind of a sales rate. So no matter what luck is always a huge factor in anything like this. Skill matters, but only in that it reduces the amount of luck you need.
Right.
In the end, you still need that one little hit. And will I get that in 5 years or will I not?
Yeah.
I don't
say. Well, now that
well,
you've been on Keystroke Medium, that's much more likely to happen. Almost everybody gets a big upswing.
I have a feeling that somebody's going to call you with a movie contract in about 5 minutes after we hang up this call.
Yeah, usually that's what happens.
What people do when they come on our show.
Odyssey 1 has actually been shopped around, but and I did have an animation studio, an American Funimation maybe, or they were curious about the Hayden War series, but the sales numbers just weren't there for them. You know, they wanted like 7-figure sales. You know, and it's like, okay, good luck. By the time anybody gets to 7 figures, those rights are gone.
Yeah,
Get in early.
Yeah.
That's pretty
well. It's we're at the hour now, and as always with our show, it's always fun to talk and geek out about things, and I'm pretty sure we geeked out on this show more than we have recently, just on covers and a lot of everything else, and I think that's very fun to do. Evan, can you share with our listeners and viewers where they can find out more about you and your writing?
Well, I've got a website at evancurrie.ca. And if you're interested in the first Hayden book, you can sign up with the newsletter link there, and you can get the download links for free or on Silver Wings.
Good deal.
Excellent. Well, everybody that was hanging out with us in the chat room, you were kind of low key today, which I'm concerned about.
They were in their zone. I think they did a great
job.
We should give them all a clap.
No, clap for the live chat audience. Very good, very good. Thank you for not burning down the chat room. I appreciate that. Make sure if you're not watching the live show and you're listening on the feed, come check out a live show out, because the live chat is where the magic happens. Evans, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time.
No problem. It's fun.
Let's see. Next week, who do we have? I don't remember. We have Craig Martell's coming on the show next week. We're going to talk
Craig.
A lot of his collaboration projects, and then going to talk a little bit about his 20 Books to 50K conference that we're going to at the beginning of November. So that'll be fun. And then Glenn Stewart is coming on the 23rd. So make sure you guys come back for that. For Scott Moon, I am Josh Hayes. We have been live with Evan Currie. Make sure you come back next time. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great Monday.